And we're live. Hey, everybody. Today it is Mr. Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios and 3D Puff Pro. 3D Puff Pro Tools.com or 3dpuffpro.com?
Tools.com.
3dpuffprotools.com. We have Matt Enderly from Patch Phrase, and I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. And today we will be we're doing a which one? It's an Auto Digitizing versus Manual Digitizing.
Yes.
Show. I was like, wait a minute, it's not a Digitizing 911 because that was the first thing that came into my mind.
No,
but it's not a Digitizing 911. We're going to be talking about Auto Digitizing versus Manual Digitizing, and I believe that we have an example that we're going to break into a million pieces. Hopefully, we're going to see if we can break everybody's software today, even your guys' in the audience. But first, we'll go ahead and grab a few comments. We have Barb LaFawn, hello, from Central Minnesota. We have Dustin from Spokane, Washington. We have Mike Muldowney from Canada. He just gets the country. There you go. We have Cindy King from Odessa, Texas. And we have Bob here from South Carolina. And we'll grab more if they come, when they come in. If you guys are watching this on the replay, do use hashtag replay so that we can see that you guys are catching up with us. All right. So, Justin, I believe you have the file, or does Matt have the file? Which one are we pulling up first?
I got the file, but one real quick announcement.
Uh-oh.
Ooh, an announcement.
Ooh.
I do have those Texas designs from last week up in the store. So there's the 3D Puff one. I am putting the link in the comments. There's the 3D Puff one I came up with. I stylized the steer head a little bit for that one. And the finished one for the regular stitch. There it is. So it came out a little bit better than what we were playing with at the end of the show last week. So
with the hand stitch effect, right, on the satins?
Yeah, the hand stitch effect. It's a little rough. Looks better in person. It looks pretty filled in on the picture, but in person it does look nice and
distressed.
That
seems to be the thing. Sometimes when you get something really awesome, it's hard to get the picture just right to capture it all, and it always looks better.
I was happy that this one actually came out looking 3D, because 3D is really hard to capture with shadows and stuff. So,
yeah, but absolutely,
yeah, they came out pretty cool. But they're available in the store now if you want to check them out.
Awesome. And I do believe, Matt, we have a links list for this week's show.
We do not.
We might by the time of the end of the show. And when we do, or if we do, we will drop that in the comments.
Way to put me on the spot.
I didn't. I said
locking it now.
Control, Alt, Delete, and we're in trouble.
All right. So let me pull up my digitizing software here.
And we will be using Wilcom today, correct?
Wilcom, my fave. All right. So we're going to take a look at the difference between Wilcom's Auto Digitizing and Manual Digitizing, and the pros and cons. Um, Personally, I don't think that there's too many pros when it comes to auto digitizing, just because the decisions that the computer makes.
I mean, if you're doing an emoji face, that's a really big fill with a slight border and some eyes and a mouth.
Yeah,
It
real
could do
simple designs that, like you said, if there's a fill area with a satin border and the computer does pick up, uh, the widths or the sizes of the elements, and it actually picks the right stitch to use, and there's just a little bit of adjustments of maybe some pull and push compensation. Yeah, it can be your friend if you're trying to do something quickly and you're looking for a real flat embroidery look.
There's no inside joke, folk. I promise. Maybe there's one. Matt's gonna drop that link in the comments, I'm sure.
I'm sure he will. Yes.
We'll put it in the link list because everyone wants to watch this live.
I think that we should have it in the links list every week, at least until applique get away.
Yes, probably. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into creating the auto digitizing file for this. So as you can see, one of the main drawbacks is you're not always going to have crisp, clear, nice, clean vector art, which really is really important when using an auto digitizer. I know a lot of the softwares out there that are built specifically for auto digitizing, they do suggest using vector art, because if you bring it in layers, the auto digitizing function is going to recognize those layers, and it does decide on stitches a little bit better with that vector art. But a lot of times, as digitizers or inverters, you're going to get designs that are JPEGs or even worse resolution. This particular art, it's good enough for me to manually digitize. It's not the best resolution, but as you can see, it's picking up right off the bat just the initial calculation that Wacom's doing. It's picking up 135 colors. Now, just looking at the art, it's not, doesn't seem like there's that many colors, but it's picking up every pixel that may be different from each other from the way it calculates. You can, in Wacom, you can toggle the number of colors and the amount of detail that you want in it, and it will reduce those colors. But again, if you're forcing it down to a good amount of colors that you're trying to work with, it is going to really simplify that art. As you can see here, the process bitmap that's turning into as you reduce those colors. This is down to 9 colors, but as you can see, it's really changing a lot of these colors in here and a lot of the detail. To simplify it, this is the way it's calculating. So even if I bring it up to, let's go to 12 colors, it's gonna do some weird stuff to the art. As you can see here, once it's processing, it gives you a breakdown of all the colors. You can, at this point, you can choose colors to omit. I think this is where it's omit. Yeah, you can choose colors to omit. So if there is something that's just like a dot here and there, like that purple, maybe the dark red, you can omit those colors. So this is the result of the auto digitizing. First off, I know I don't need that background. Another thing is I know this is going to be a patch, so I'm going to go ahead and select the dark blue color. But as you can see, it does leave quite a bit of different stitch types that it chose. Areas that necessarily don't need to be fill stitches, like this white outline. If I were manually digitizing those would be a satin stitch on top of this red area that has fills. It did add some weird color from these kind of straggling pixels out here at the edge. The kangaroo is all over the place as far as some of it fill stitches, some of it satin stitches. Again, with the outline, something with fine detail like this that you're going to be doing on the kangaroo, you're either going to be doing a nice even satin stitch or a running stitch if the satin stitches are not wide enough. So if I were to use auto digitizing, another thing that I've noticed that auto digitizing does a lot is if you do have fill areas with text on top, it'll actually cut out those areas of satin stitches where the text lies, which not a ideal thing to do. Layering satin stitches on top of fills, there's no reason why you can't do that. Sometimes, depending on if you're doing direct embroidery and you are dealing with something that has a little bit rougher material, a piqué or a towel or something like that, adding a fill underneath text actually gives you a nice flat surface to work with. But yeah, just having that those areas that are cut out, it's just going to cause more problems than help you. As you can see, the text is pretty much not even there the way it's supposed to. It's broken up into pieces. It's got more colors than it should. So looking at this, if I were to come in here and auto digitize this and decide, is it simple enough that I can just do a couple of adjustments and I'm good to go? Or am I going to spend more time trying to edit all these, delete parts, end up having to digitize parts over again anyways? So I would more than likely opt not to auto digitize. So is there any other things that you may have caught that I missed there, Matt and Jeff?
No. I think we pretty much covered how poor of a job auto digitizing did in this case. I know before we went live, we were talking about some situations where it would work better. Say something, I think Jeff even said like an emoji or something where it's very basic and flat.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot of times too, and if you do have the ability, there's a lot of embroiderers out there that have the capabilities of doing artwork, and they use Corel or Illustrator. So not necessarily recreating the whole thing in Illustrator, because again, if you're looking at how much time it's going to take you to completely recreate that in art, just to be able to bring it into auto digitizing, that in hopes that it auto digitizes better, you're still adding a lot of time. But say you can do that outer ring, that black outer ring, it's something like that. If you have maybe basic shapes saved or something like that in vector, and you can just bring that in, measure with the size and measure the cutout in the middle, bring that in, that could add a quick shortcut to a different element that you may digitize by hand. So stuff like that, I think real basics out of digitizing may be a quick shortcut for you, but hoping that you're going to get a real detailed logo, something with a lot of colors, a lot of elements, a lot of detail lines. It's not ideal. As a digitizer trying to digitize for somebody, trying to give them a quality design, or even an embroiderer that's doing it in-house, the efficiency and the quality of the design and how it sews on your machine is definitely going to be affected by using auto digitizing features like this on a design like this.
Uh-oh, I heard a noise. I blame Jeff.
No, don't blame me.
So big. What's going on?
Jeff doing? What's
our producer doing?
I'm producing with blooper sound effects.
Producing garbage.
Oh, is that what you're calling the show right now? Man, Matt.
So
someone's fired.
So what I could do is I'm going to jump over here and this little guy here is just a nice clear image of the little bird that's in his pocket.
All right, Justin, I'm going to make you undo because we have a question from Ginger, and it says, in Wilcom, is there a redraw to take out extra nodes and clean up lines?
I don't think so.
You can go into node edit and you can pull out nodes.
You can pull out nodes, but like
there's a lot of them.
I know in Illustrator there's a tool that you can grab, and you actually it's a pencil tool, but instead of drawing, you run the pencil across the edge, and it'll smooth it out, so it'll reduce the amount of nodes in that line. So like when you auto trace in art programs such as Vector, you might get the same effect depending on how clean the original image is that you're auto tracing. So in Vector, it does have a cool function where you can go in and just clean up lines with strokes of your mouse or your pen. So it will reduce those amount of nodes. And I think there's a couple other functions that you can just grab things and tell it to reduce detail lines and nodes in art files. I don't think there is in Wacom. Um, there is a lot of functions that I wish I would see in digitizing software that you do see in art software. I know there's probably programming headaches when it comes to stuff like that, because it does have to calculate stitches and angles and stuff like that when you're affecting nodes. But
I wonder if you, and this is going to sound horrible, you auto digitize it, convert it to vector, and then go into Corel mode. So we're going to add a whole bunch of steps in there, but that might be one of the ways that you would be able to do
right. And again, there may be ways to really prep your art, and like you said, bouncing back and forth between auto digitizing, setting it to a vector, cleaning it up, coming back. But again, when you're doing 5 or 6 different steps to get to something that you can manually digitize in one step, you're definitely going to cut down on time.
There's I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but under edit you can do smooth curves, and that'll get rid of some of the nodes, but it's going to be a lot of guesswork.
There it is.
So Ginger says Stitch Artist has a redraw, and so does Willcom. It's basically the slow redraw that you can look at the file and how it's going to sew. But generally, you're not going to edit your lines there. You're going to have to exit that and then edit lines.
And in Brilliance, I think you can, though. You can pause it, manipulate it, and then continue it. I do believe you can do that.
But that function, Matt, that smooth curves that's under edit, that is exactly what that is. I applied that on there. It did take care of quite a bit of nodes in this area. Luckily, this area, it took out nodes in between the two main corner nodes, so it didn't distort it a whole lot. So, if this particular stitch was okay and it did path it and it did choose the right type of stitch in this area, and that smooth curves helped you out on that, then yeah, that's definitely a function that you can utilize. But like I said, this white area here, these thinner areas, I would never use a fill stitch. There's no need for it, and I think it looks a lot cleaner if you're going to come back with nice even satin stitches for the detail on the flag there. Any other questions there, Jeff?
It looks like that's all of them. Making sure. Ramona does have a suggestion here, and I'm going to bring it up on screen. I was just going to mention smooth curves. You can also remove small stitches, which can help with those micro small edge stitches. It's under the design tab.
Yeah.
But wouldn't removing small stitches be more geared towards the actual stitch between needle penetrations, not the actual nodes itself?
I think it does in the case that if there's like weird nodes, like say like just going down the edge of one of these areas here.
To say it's really zigzag, but it's supposed to be a straight line.
Yeah, if it's really zigzaggy and there's some weird nodes, it will throw some extra really small stitches in there, so it might grab those areas. The only thing I don't like about those is when you're applying to something like that. And another thing with auto digitizing is, this whole shape is all one piece. So if my problem area was only in, say, like these outlines, and I'm applying any of those functions, it's going to be a universal application to what it's going to. So it's not going to just fix one small area like the function in Illustrator where you use the pen to actually run down the exact line that you're wanting to smooth out. It's not an overall grab the element and an overall correction to it. All right. So if I were to manually digitize this one, I know this is a patch, so the blue area is going to be twill, so I'm not going to worry about that fill area. We've got the outer ring, that's going to be a fill, which is this going to be a marrow edge, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most definitely.
So I'm not going to worry about the satin edge on the outside. We'll do the overlap or the what's it called, the bleed out there for his marrow. But we got the British. Is this British or New Zealand or
That's Australian.
Australian? Well, yeah, I guess the kangaroo would mean that it's Australian. Huh?
There's no signs that would make you
I
think
mean,
Australia.
Let's be real. The British own like half of the world, or over. They own the entire world, known world, or whatever.
All right, so we got this part of the flag out here that's behind the kangaroo. So we got that. We got this inner satin border as far as the white. We got the text, and we got the kangaroo. So
we have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between the Wilcom and Hatch 3 Auto Digitizing or Brilliance? Just wondering if one software does a better job than others.
I'm sure there is more, one software that does do better in some aspects, and then you might have, elements that are do better in another one. Wilcom, I think, does a decent job on some of the designs. I think Drawwings was one of the first ones that actually came out that was specifically designed for this. So I remember seeing it at a trade show in Long Beach many years ago when it first came out, and watching them sample the software at the show. The really easy designs, and they're bringing in vector art. It did seem like they were doing pretty good as far as picking the right stitch types and in the overlaps and stuff like that. It was doing well. But like I said, a lot of times in the reality of what digitizers and what embroiderers are getting as far as artwork, they're not going to get clean artwork. So again, it's a time factor.
Yeah.
If you are running a business where, say like you have a kiosk or something like that, where quick little designs, like you said, a smiley face or something like that, where they're one color designs, they're not real difficult, there's not a lot of detail. I think these can work well with you, especially if you have some editing knowledge where you can go in there and quickly correct the things that you see that are wrong right off the bat. But to answer your question, yeah, I think every software may have an advantage on one thing or many things over another software, and then that other software may do other things well.
And I would add to that Hatch is made by Wilcom.
Right.
It's the same parent company, so I would expect them to have the same engine that does that in both softwares.
Yes, exactly. It's just the two softwares pretty much have the same elements. The interface is pretty much the most difference between the two softwares is how you get to those menus and the shortcuts and whatnot are the major differences between the two, and the elements that come with Hatch are different than elements that are add-ons as Wilcom. So
if you give me like 2 minutes, I'm booting up Drawings.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Did you ever use Auto Digitizing Drawings?
So Drawings was the very first software I started with. When I bought my very first machine, they were like, I said I wanted to do my own designs, and they said, buy Drawings. And I said, okay, because salesman told me. So I have Drawings. I have it. I don't use it very much anymore. But when I first started, I was using it. And then when I started to actually try to like map or, path things and that kind of stuff, that's when I found that it wasn't going to do what I needed it to do, and then I went to a different software.
So did you use it as a manual digitizing software, or did you use it as the auto digitizer?
I use it more as the auto digitizing. I would go into, because it comes with modular wings, at least some version of it. And so I would go in there, and if you wanted to do anything like really manually, you wanted to do pathing, that kind of stuff, you would have to save it from drawings into an NGS file, which Wings can open, and then you would open it in Wings, and then you would have to hope that you had the plugins to do what you wanted to do. So 6 of one, half a dozen of another type of a situation.
Right. Yeah, I think auto digitizing is maybe a good stepping stone for someone who wants to learn. And like I said, they're choosing really, really simple designs to start with. And that way they can auto digitize and see the simple elements that they're doing, and they can actually get in there and kind of even sew those designs out, see where there's problems, and they can identify it in the designs and where they need to edit. So I think it's a learning stepping stone.
I mean, it definitely has its advantages when you're starting out, but I think it's very important to know, if you're buying a software for auto digitizing, then you also want to make sure that it has the tools that you can grow too. Because when I was doing it, I didn't have the tools that I could grow that I needed, and so I ended up having to buy another software to be able to get those features that I wanted.
Right.
And if I would have, I mean, really, I was coming from a background of zero and going into it. So if I would have probably done a little more research and followed a few more people, I might have had the foresight not to do that. But
gotcha.
And how many softwares do you own now?
We don't want to talk about it. I mean, I could just say 5, and I think that's a fair guesstimate.
Guesstimate. If you have to guesstimate the number of softwares you have too many.
Well, because I have to think and count. You guys, Jeff, you might have too many. I would agree. Let's see if I can paste this in here.
Now you get enough where you. Okay, my webcam's freaking out on me.
Oh, here we go. I'm going to share my screen. I got it. Maybe. Share screen. This one, share. Okay. So, I have to do this. Add the stream. We'll get there eventually. So, I've got the software here. It automatically wants to. I was pasting the artwork in, and the second that I hit Control V, it popped up here. It wants to auto digitize, trace to outline. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through the options that it'll let me. Scale image. I'm not really going to scale it. Accuracy. I will do a color limit because I see one. Justin, you already counted how many colors that's supposed to be, right?
That's like 6 colors max, 7.
So I'll say 8 just for fun. And you can see how it kind of flattened everything out and simplified it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit trace. And as you can see, it did the background. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup them. So now I can pull that out. And I'm missing text. So you can see it kind of distorted the shape. And we're going to go off the right one because I want to say that was the one that we had said that we needed. But you can see view, get rid of the hoop. View, get rid of the grid lines because they're driving me nuts. Not the grid lines. Grid. So I'm going to just hide the grid there. And it's already kind of on a fabric for 3D render. But you can see how, it didn't know what to do with this star at all. It kind of had a heart attack there, I think.
It looks like a cloud now.
It does kind of look like a cloud. If I didn't know that it was a star ahead of time, I wouldn't have known. This one, it didn't try to get that into satins, which I would have. If I grab some of the objects here, you can see how it cut around the body, and it put the white background behind it. That's fun. Oh, because it's
Oh, wow.
on top of the white background. So now I'm
So
doing
that actually layered all the colors on top of each other. It didn't recognize that one color stopping and the other one's beginning.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's looking like here. So we'll go ahead and grab that and drag it off. Yeah, so it looks like it's full black fill behind all of that. And then you've got a white fill here.
The
I
one
can
thing
see.
the one thing I did notice as far as the way it shows the kangaroo was a bit more intuitive than the Wilcom.
Mm,
The Wilcom seemed like there was all kinds of different stitch counts at different angles. It did do it a little bit more uniform. Not the best, but it did definitely do it a little bit more uniform than Wilcom.
so if we look at the size of this, it's 67 millimeters. So that's what, a little over 3 inches.
A little
Don't
over
make math.
2.5, a
Two
little
and a
over two
half
and a half,
inches.
almost 2 3/4.
So 2 3/4. It has 14,000 stitches. 8 colors because I told it 8, and this is how long it's been since I've been in here. That I want to turn off the 3D preview. And we're just going to go to the file print so that we can take a look at how many trims it has in there, because I'm sure it's got a few. Stabilizer, it gives us that yarn date, 18 color changes. It doesn't look like it tells me how many trims it has. A few. But I don't see anywhere where it says it, unless if you see it on there. I'm kind of squinting looking at it myself.
And it may not because of how much layering it did on top of each other.
And that could very well be too. It looks like it does this outer ring, and it just kind of goes in. So it's a lot of stitches for a 2.5 inch circle. That's for sure.
Right.
So, anyways, when you started talking about drawings, I was like, wait, I have that one.
Gotcha.
And I could show you. So that was the 8-second drawings.
And now that pop goes back into the closet forever.
That's pretty much what I'm going to do with it. I'm basically closing it out, and I like it because a lot of the files that I did initially have it are in drawings, and when I redo them, I go into drawings and I change them so that I can open them up in Wilcom and redo them. I'm converting my old catalog. That's the word I'm going to use.
Converting your old catalog.
Yep. So Ramona says, I have one for each machine. I have like 2 for each machine, and probably one for all of Matt's machines too. And Barb says, I started with the 5D embroidery software 20 years ago as I used it with my Viking Ruby. So I've never heard of 5D.
Never heard of that one either. So as you can see, my approach is breaking this white outline into elements. So you're going to have catching different light off of each of these satin stitches here. It's not all one piece. It's not a fill stitch. You're going to have satins that are coming down at this angle, another satin that's going to come horizontally and then vertically. And I'm just choosing my pathing to start up here, work my way around so I can come back around, go ahead and digitize this star that's going to be underneath that white border, and then come back with that white satin border. So I am choosing elements to try to, run together to reduce the numbers of color changes. Knowing that this is a patch, I'm not going to worry about if this was a hat, I wouldn't try to go from fully top area to the bottom area using the same color sequence just for registration purposes. I would break it up a bit, but being that it's a patch, it should be fine. So just coming back around to the bottom area. I always forget what tool I'm using. Start digitizing using one tool, and then bounce back and forth, and I start plotting points wrong. Should you tell me if you see any questions come through there, Jeff? Because I'm staring at Vocom now.
You're focused. No, that's okay. I'm keeping an eye on here to make sure that if we do have any questions, we pull them up so you guys can ask them.
So typically what I'll do is kind of digitize the section and afterwards kind of go back, make sure that all my start and stop points are where they need to be, to make sure that my pathing is correct and I don't have any errant trims because I have start and stop points that aren't matching up. Those are good. And actually, seeing that this area here, this white outlines to this part of the flag is kind of detached from the rest, I'm rethinking this, thinking I should probably do this area first. And because the head of the kangaroo is overlapping this section to this section, I can sew this area, use a travel stitch to go back up to this area. So I'm going to go ahead and do this area first, and then I can bounce back over.
We do have a question. Ginger asked, would you use closest join or branching?
I don't use either. Closest join in Wacom, it is a quick tool to use that you don't have to worry about going back in there and manually starting and stopping or changing your start and stop points. But I've noticed that sometimes it chooses some weird points. Like say like you have a satin that's coming up at like a 45-degree angle, and then it's coming into maybe one that's at 90 degrees. Instead of it ending here and starting where it meets the next line, it sometimes will like choose the endpoint down here, or like it's the furthest possible area that it's closest point to the next line, but it's not at the end. So it's actually causing that to sew, stop, travel back up, sew back to it and meet to jump over. And depending on what kind of fabric or what you're doing or what kind of element it is, you might see a gap where that start and stop happens. So the closest, or the closest join, is that what the function is called? Sometimes it can be kind of weird.
So on top of that, one of the things that I've noticed when I use closest join is you can use closest join and you can say, wait, I want to change it. I want to manually specify, and you can move your start and stop points. But if you go in and edit so much as a node, it'll apply the closest join again, and it'll move your start and stops again. And so it can actually, like when I would do it, it would work against me as I would change things. And then I'd nudge a node or shift something, and then it would regenerate, and I would have to go back and forth. And eventually I just got tired of that and turned it off.
Right. As far as branching, there's that function of branching where you can grab some elements. Get out my function here. You can grab a couple elements, and the branching tools say like you first choose your starting point. So say like I say start here, then end here. Now that becomes all one point or all one object. The only reason I don't use that, and a couple of reasons why, depending on the size of the element that you're working with, you might have a different, well, I guess it doesn't apply no, it doesn't. I was thinking that if you have a different underlay on one element, it's going to apply the same element underlay to everything. It doesn't, but what it does do is if you have to change the details or the settings on just one of the branches of that set, you now have to break it apart, change the settings on that one, and go back and group it and branch it again. You don't have that individual control over each of one of those satin stitches. And also, I've noticed that there is times where it may add some extra underlay, because if the computer, again, you're dealing with a computer calculating what the best path to take. So sometimes it may sew portion of a satin stitch, it may run up one area. So these three lines are pretty straightforward and pretty minimal, that it's not going to do all kinds of crazy stuff. But if you have a bunch of, like, say, like if you imagine a tree, like the silhouette of tree branches and leaves and stuff like that, if you grouped and did branching on 50 different elements, that computer might choose to run up here, come do this leaf down here, run down here, come back, and it's adding not only stitch counts to your design, but it might add some different layers of travel stitches and underlay stitches, and you might get thread breaks and stuff like that. So I just, for quick and ease, those tools are nice. And maybe, like I said, something simple like that, where it's just three kind of straight lines joining each other, it's not gonna kind of add those weird things to it. But I, especially when you're digitizing for somebody else like I do, I want to have complete control over, if they say, hey, this one line is just, it's not dense enough, or it's hitting the seam of the hat, or I need to change this one thing. It takes more time for me to break things apart, make the changes, go back and figure out what branching, start and stop points that I need to do again, than just manually do it from the get-go. All right.
I think that's a pretty good explanation.
I
Give a round of applause for Justin.
This is
a clap in the comments.
Oh, there you go. Clap in the comments. I like that.
I like claps.
Blooper reel.
So again, also with start and stops, I like controlling them, because if it is an area where you're going to have a tie-in, and the element that you're starting with does have a section of it where it's tucking up underneath another element. So like this satin stitch is going to tuck up underneath the kangaroo face here. I always put the start point underneath, so it's going to be hidden with the top stitches, and that way any type of tack-in or tie-in stitch, it's not going to be visible. Sometimes it may add, like if it was out here, it could add kind of like that bump or that bubble where there's a tie-in stitch. And so anytime that I can tie-in stitches underneath an element that's going to sew again, I do. So another reason of full control as far as the start and stops. And a lot of times when I get into speed digitizing, and there is elements where there's straight lines on one side, and there is some elements that you need to do a different shape on the other side. There's times where I get kind of going fast, and maybe when you're doing the point counterpoint, which is the column A tool in Wacom, there's times where that straight side, I may not be right on that line when I'm going fast. So I'll come back through and either edit those nodes out, or I can just delete those. And since I have a node here, it is going to be a straight line. Or another way of doing it is if you use the column B, that's where you actually plot one side first, so that I can actually do the straight line, come back and do whatever I need to do crazy on this side. So that's kind of,
just wanted to mention something, side note. So we had a couple of questions about Hatch versus Wilcom specifically. There is a needle bar live episode that we did discuss that And I have the link to that in the link list, which if you go scroll up a little bit to the comment, it'll be links.embnerd.com/episode 62. And then on there, I have a link to that YouTube video. So you can go ahead, click that once this video is done, and you can go watch that one if you would like to see our explanation of the differences and why Wilcom would have two different software things. And maybe eventually we'll do a Wilcom versus Pulse and Wilcom versus Wings and whatever.
We're gonna have to start Wilcom versus Wilcom Hatch because Hatch 3 just came out not too long ago. So
yeah, oh
it's
yeah,
all the features.
Yeah, Hatch in that video is Hatch 2, not Hatch 3. So I guess we'll have to revisit it now.
So here's a good example of where if I were branching this area that I did before, I made a change in my decision as far as the pathing of what I'm going to sew first. I came down here, did this area of the white stripes first, resequenced those first, came back, and before I had it where this sewed first, came down or came back around. So this came to this point, sewed back out. And when I'm resequencing, I was choosing, this. I'm going to extend that out to come to this point now. And when I resequence and I go to grab this one, I realize these are all one piece. So again, I'm having to undo what I've done before, which you can break apart. Then you can come and resequence. And those were resequencing by select. So what I do is I select and hold down the control key. And if I select each individual element as in order that I want them to run, and then you hit sequence by selects, it'll actually resequence those in the selects that order that you selected them. And because I did change the kind of the stitching direction that I did before, I'm going to change my start and end points. The little point of this travel stitch that I have coming dipping down in there, and since this sews first, I'm going to delete that point. Oops. Put my end and my start and end. Okay. Now, do a quick redraw. It's going to show the sequence that I changed things at. So it starts down there, work its way up and around. So now I have digitized the section that, even though by the art's concerned, there's detached areas of that white, but I digitized it in a way where you're not going to have any needle ups, no trims. It's going to keep that needle sewing. It's going to keep your machine moving. So less time in the machine. So where did I leave off here? I'm going to go ahead and walk down to the star. My hotkeys on my mouse that I usually use for ending stitches isn't working today for some reason.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
I need to do that. Right before we started, my computer was doing something weird where it was just I opened my browser and it was just putting the letter B across the search bar just repeatedly.
I got a coworker today with the old cover up the mouse sensor trick. I used the label maker right behind her back, typed out gotcha, printed it, and then stuck it on the mouse when she turned around real quick. And it took her about 5 minutes before found out and flipped it over, and then saw that it said gotcha. And it was pretty good.
Oh man. So I have some stars that I saved. So that's one little shortcut that something, an element that you use a lot of. So you're not having to come through and especially like, a star, typically you want to do satin stitches to kind of give it really that faceted look, where the light's going to hit off each of these legs of the star, arms of the star. I know this is only a 5-point star, but I could definitely come through here and use one that I know it's already properly done, and I could just copy and paste these, rotate them in places. I know I don't have the nifty array tool like you do, Jeff.
I can't believe you don't have that tool. That was like the first one I bought.
I know
And
I
the
didn't get it.
If you know how many degrees that is, you can just rotate it by that number of degrees.
Yeah, I could, but the amount of time that it took
fun.
me, the amount of time that it took me this, I didn't have to do any calculations or anything. So I'm just gonna edit these nodes here. And there is a lot of overlap here on this star. So definitely some areas where you're going to have double, triple, quadruple layers of satins. So now that I can see that they're all there, I can come in and say, just kind of edit this and cut down some of these nodes to make sure that we don't have too much overlapping.
And while you're doing that, Justin, I'm going to go ahead and drop the links list in there one more time. If you guys want to go and check out the links, you can. Justin was just published in a alpha blogger. There we go. It's up there on the screen right now. And we've included a link to that as well. So if you guys want to jump in on the links list, you can check all that information out. That was my commercial, Justin. I'm getting good at the commercial thing.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Danny does have a question for you, though. Could you just use a weld function to combine them all?
You can.
So we got you back up on the screen there, Justin.
Okay, so I just selected all those and welded it. And so what the welding is going to do is it creates the total shape, but now the stitches are all just one stitch going one direction. So if I wanted to do this as a fill stitch, then yes, I could have welded it, switched it to a fill stitch. And I think, yeah, it's doing some weird stuff here, even with the fill stitch.
Just got to get rid of all the underlay.
Is it the underlay?
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Should never have underlay. That's extra stitches. Extra stitches means extra income, extra expenses. You got to charge your customer more.
So one thing about welding things, I've noticed that when you weld things and change it to a fill stitch, it actually doesn't necessarily treat it as a regular tatami fill stitch. Like you can't come in here and grab tatami underlay. But if you convert it to a complex fill, that's when it actually becomes an actual fill stitch. And you can use those regular fill, tatami fill settings. But yes, if I wanted to do this as a fill, and I guess for sake of argument of this one, it did kind of leave these squared off edges.
I still think that you would have, if you'd done it as a fill, you would have still done it as individual objects, Justin. I just have a feeling that's not quite enough dimension for you. It's a little flat and textureless.
Who knows? Maybe I would have added some dimension. But I know Jeff would have done it this way. I guess this is nice and flat and smooth. Just
it's my staple. But boom.
Exactly. So yes, you definitely could, if saving that that star that I have, that stock star, and I wanted to utilize this as a fill stitch, come in here, bring these points out to a single point. Then yeah, I could have welded, converted, and there's a filled star right there. So like I said, for sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and leave that as a fill. Just for Jeff's sake. How about that?
Flat.
Flat.
You should have a favorite style type and just label it Jeff, and it's flat.
It's every flat element that you could possibly have.
And I believe you can share your favorite styles with other people, so we could put a file download so that everyone.
Oh, can you?
I'm feeling the love, guys, man. I tell you, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the love today.
Just call it Jeff 1, Jeff 2, Jeff 3. Anything that doesn't have any texture or anything.
There you go. I like the way you think.
But just go to Home Depot, buy some paint for my wall, and be like, do you want eggshell? Do you want satin? Do you want matte? And it's like, whoa, no. I want Jeff just as flat as it can be. Just removes the texture from the wall.
So what I'm digitizing, I like digitizing another high contrast color than the elements below it. And that way I can see my outlines and stitches a lot easier. So a lot of times you might see pictures of my screen or see me digitizing live. And you're wondering, why is he using bright green when the elements are white?
Yep. It definitely send it back for an edit.
Send it back for an edit. So, all right. Here's a quick shortcut that I can show you guys. So,
well,
I
hold
got
on.
Yes.
I've got a question for you. Is it just me, or does the inner circle look off-centered from the larger circle? And I think that's a design thing.
It is definitely not symmetrical.
Yeah. And I would have found that out right now. I did the center part. I know that I'm going to want to sew this outer fill before this inner satin border. So now that I got the most important part is because it is crossing over in these areas, to definitely secure this area and this shape in first. So I'm going to, did I copy it already? I'm going to copy and paste that circle and increase it a percentage point so it is enlarging uniformly. But right there you can see it's definitely off. So in this situation, I would ask the customer if that's there for a reason. More than likely, the artwork's just kind of weird, kind of tweaked. So especially I would think with a patch, you're going to want something symmetrical.
I can say it's supposed to be symmetrical. It's probably a PowerPoint or Microsoft Paint patch.
Gotcha. So
I did duplicate a ton of PowerPoint designs.
Gotcha. So duplicating that circle, bringing it out. Again, I'm not worried about that outer satin because it is going to be narrowed. Bringing it out. How much do you compensate for that extra fill area?
It's normally like a 3.5 to 4
millimeter.
Yeah.
All right, let's just increase that to, it's almost at 96, so let's just increase that to 100. So if I convert that to a fill, and if I bring that underneath so I can see, and you copy and paste that inner one, bring that to a fill. It's like both of those, you could actually exclude the center and it does the cutout for you. Now you're just left with that outer piece that you're supposed to have. Adding my underlay. Okay. So it looks like we're about at that time. So unfortunately I didn't get to the kangaroo. So you either do that off camera, show you guys the result, or depending on when Matt needs to play with his Miro machine with this one, maybe we can continue next week and finish it off.
So you want to hear something actually rather interesting to anyone who's not in my predicament? So yesterday, the wife is doing laundry and she complains that the stupid, I'm not quoting for YouTube's sake, the stupid dryer doesn't work anymore. And I'm like, what's wrong with it? She's like, it won't even turn on. I'm like, okay, sure, that's what's happening. Yep, it won't turn on. Test voltmeter, nothing at the outlet. Go into the breaker panel and the breaker's dead. Like the actual breaker itself is dead. So, of course, she needs the dryer, so I have to sacrifice the breaker for my happy machines to get the dryer. So now I can't embroider until I replace the breaker. So, looks like Patch Phrase is pretty quiet today. So, you have some time.
But you have clean clothes.
Yes, I do.
That's mildly important.
Yeah.
Well, for your coworkers, it's okay for us.
Well, she put the clothes outside to dry, but it's so humid outside. It would have took forever to dry. But yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if time isn't a factor for you, and I see Randall made a comment here, a question here asking if we're going to continue doing live, we can definitely pick up next week, make this a two-parter, and I can get into the kangaroo.
I think that would be a good idea because we never actually finish a design unless if it's one that we sit through for like 3 hours. There's a couple that I did. I think Jeff did a couple too, where we do the entire design start to finish, but it takes like 3 hours. Wouldn't normally take that long if you're not doing it live or on live stream, but because we're answering questions and whatever, yeah.
Right.
Like there's actually a kangaroo patch that I did do live, and I do believe that did take me 3 hours, but again, there was a lot of questions. But so I think maybe just come back next week for that. It sounds like we're doing that
next week for the kangaroo. And in case you weren't here earlier, last week's designs that we were working on, the Texas design, I do have those up on my website. I just threw a link up again in the notes or the comments. Here's the 3D version of it that came out. I think pretty cool. And there's also the distress flat version. Nice and flat, right, Jeff?
Green stamp right there.
The distressed one that we're actually digitizing live. So those are up in the store if you want to check those out.
All right. Well,
you know what I think we need? We need a 12 millimeter puff design with like multi-layers and everything that just says flat.
I'm pretty sure that there's only one of us out of here that has done a 12 millimeter puff hat.
Okay, well, how about this? Louise, I know you're watching. I want to see 14 millimeter flat puff.
There you go.
Good luck. That's all I gotta say. I hope your machine warranty is valid. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say that if you guys are not in the Embroidery Nerd group, please request to join the Facebook group on the Embroidery Nerd. We are all in there, and make sure that you answer all 4 questions. Answer all the questions. That's how we screen. So if you don't answer all the questions, you're not going to get in. You're going to get declined. But we do not block you, so you can come back and attempt again to answer all 4 questions. If you would like to also join us over on Discord, we do chat over there quite a bit. It's a little bit more of a tight-knit community, and you can get there from embnerd.com/Discord.
Yep. Or you just do link embnerd.com, and it'll have everything there.
Yep. So you can do that as well. Announcements, we've got Applique Getaway coming up. Matt is going to be teaching about patches. Justin is going to be doing 3D puff. I will be doing raising a young entrepreneur and a class on ball caps. So make sure that you go there to Applique Getaway. You can also get the link from the links list there to sign up. That's going to be in Irving, Texas, I believe July 15th through the 17th. And I don't know if we have any more announcements to that. Do you guys have anything that you got coming up that you want to blurb?
I think next is coming up is applicant getaway. I know all of us have some work to do on our classes, so we'll be busy.
Yep, that we will. But with that, that is Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios. We have Matt Enderly from Patchphrase, and I am Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. We're all here representing the embroidery nerd. We'll catch you guys next week.
Good night, everyone.
Adios.